I never thought that grief would be met with eviction. My husband had been lowered into the ground just 2 hours earlier. Still in my black funeral dress, I stood in the living room, the fabric clinging to my arms like wet paper. Dana, my daughter-in-law, folded her arms and looked me square in the face. No tears, no softness, just that smug smirk she always wore when she thought she'd won something. "Pack your bags and get out," she said. I blinked. My hands were empty, save for the balled-up tissue I'd twisted until it tore. "Excuse me?" Michael, my son, my only son, stood behind her, his tie crooked, like he'd just thrown it on out of obligation. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just shrugged. "The house was never yours anyway, Mom." The room spun. I steadied myself on the armrest and tried to process what I'd just heard. The house, my house. The one we bought in 1987 when Michael was still losing baby teeth. The one where I'd patched drywall and scrubbed floors and stitched curtains by hand. The one where my husband and I made our lives. Dana looked pleased with herself. "We figured we'd give you until the weekend. But honestly, if you can pack tonight, that's better for everyone." Better for who? I couldn't speak. I didn't trust my voice not to crack open and spill every last ounce of heartbreak. So I nodded. That's all I could do. I nodded and walked upstairs. Upstairs, where the air still smelled like his aftershave, where the bedroom looked untouched, like he might walk in at any second and ask what all the noise was. I closed the door behind me, gently, sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence swallow me. My hands were ice, my chest was tight, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I folded a sweater. Then another. Then another. They didn't fit the suitcase quite right, and it didn't matter. I was just trying to breathe. Just trying to keep my hands busy while my life collapsed. Through the walls, I could hear them downstairs. Dana opening wine. Michael laughing at something. My son, my boy, laughing. I used to think family was forever, that if you loved well, raised them right, stood by them, they'd stand by you. But what I saw in Michael's eyes downstairs wasn't guilt. It was distance, detachment, like I was some tenant who'd overstayed her lease. I stood slowly and went to the closet, pulled out the shoebox where I'd kept every card my husband ever gave me, one for every anniversary, every Valentine's, some just because. I held the top one against my chest and breathed in the faint scent of ink and cologne. His handwriting, "To my Ruth, the center of this home." I opened the bottom drawer and found the legal envelope he'd tucked away last spring. I remember asking what it was for and him replying, "Just being smart, sweetheart." I never looked inside that drawer. I didn't need to. Robert handled the paperwork. All of it. I trusted him to keep us safe. But standing there in my black dress, with Dana's voice still echoing in my skull, "Pack your bags and get out," I needed something. Not an answer. Just proof that I hadn't imagined the life we built. I opened the drawer. Not the bottom cabinet where they kept bills, but the side one. His drawer. His pens. His little notepad with the curling corners. That's when I saw it. A receipt, folded neatly, tucked into his old checkbook. Not dated years ago. Recent. From a law office. I stared at the name. Harold Stein. My heart stuttered. That was the attorney we used when we bought the house. We hadn't needed him in decades. What had Robert been doing there just weeks ago? I didn't know. But suddenly, I needed to find out. Because something about Dana's smug certainty, Michael's shrug, didn't sit right. Robert was careful, quiet, but never careless. If something changed, he wouldn't have left me in the dark, unless someone else tried to drag the light away. I folded the receipt, slipped it into my pocket, and closed the drawer gently. My knees shook as I walked upstairs, but I didn't collapse. Not yet. I didn't have a will, but I had a name. And maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance to uncover the truth. They kicked me out thinking they'd won, but something told me they were wrong. And that night, for the first time in days, I felt something stir in me besides grief. A quiet, defiant spark. Not of anger, of knowing. A sound outside the door made me freeze. Footsteps. Then a pause. Dana's voice. Muffled, casual. Make sure she's not packing the silverware. You know how sentimental she gets. Laughter. My hand gripped the edge of the desk. Not out of fear, out of shame. I'd let it come to this. I had believed kindness would win them over. That staying quiet, staying small, would keep the peace. Instead, it erased me. I sat back down and picked up my folded cardigan, pressing it to my chest like armor. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction, not a single tear tonight. If they thought I was going to beg, they didn't know me at all. The next morning, I stood barefoot in the backyard, holding the watering can like it was something holy. The sun had barely risen, but the roses were already stretching toward the light, just like they always had. I didn't bother with gloves. Didn't care if the thorns bit into me today. I wanted to feel something that wasn't humiliation. I knelt in the dirt and ran my hand over the soil. Damp, soft, alive. I had poured my life into this yard, into this house, into this family. I tilted the can and watched the water soak into the roots. Each flower had a name. Not official ones, but the ones I'd whispered on long nights. After Michael's appendectomy, after the miscarriage, after my husband's cancer diagnosis. This one here. That was hope. And now they stood upstairs, probably still asleep after their celebration, thinking it had all belonged to them. Dana had said it so easily. The house was never yours anyway. What a lie. This wasn't brick and lumber. This was a living map of my soul. Every corner held echoes of a life I built, with bare hands and a hopeful heart. I remembered the night we painted the walls ourselves, my husband smudging blue on my nose just to make me laugh. I remembered the time Michael broke the banister sliding down it with a cape tied around his neck. I remembered the Christmas Eve my husband and I danced in the kitchen at midnight, tipsy on mulled wine and joy. The house was mine. Not because of paperwork, because I breathed into it, because I bled for it, because I became it. The coffee tasted bitter that morning. Not because it was old, but because Dana had made it. She always brewed it too strong, claimed it was European style. I took a sip out of habit, not desire. It scalded the back of my throat anyway. She hovered. That's what I remember most. Dana never hovered. But there she was, circling the kitchen like a vulture, pretending to tidy up, moving paper towels 2 inches left, rearranging mugs in the cabinet, standing too close to Michael, whispering too softly. I was seated at the table, suitcase zipped, purse at my feet. My coat hung neatly over the back of the chair. "Your ride's still coming?" Dana asked, her tone syrupy. Too sweet to be real. "Yes," I answered. "Should be here in an hour." Michael didn't look at me, just stared into his eggs like they were a puzzle. I took another sip of coffee, held it this time, let it rest in my mouth like a lie I wasn't ready to swallow. They thought they'd won. They thought this was the final goodbye. But they were nervous. I could feel it. Something in the air had shifted. Michael kept darting glances at Dana. And Dana? She flinched when I asked one simple question. "So what final paperwork are you two handling this morning?" I said, too casually. Dana paused mid-step. "What? You mentioned it yesterday." "Final paperwork," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "Is it related to the funeral arrangements?" Michael coughed. "Oh, just some bills." But his voice cracked. And Dana's eyes, sharp and small, went straight to the junk drawer. Now, that drawer had always been my domain. Receipts, tape, birthday candles, flashlights, all mine. Dana never touched it, thought it was cluttered. But this morning, she stood between it and me like a guard at a vault. That's when I knew. There was something in that drawer she didn't want me to see. I reached forward slowly, acting like I was grabbing a napkin, and stood up. "I'll take care of my breakfast plate," I said, smiling politely. "Least I can do." I carried my dish to the sink, took my time rinsing it, and circled back. When their backs were turned, I slipped open the junk drawer with 2 fingers. A folder. Red. Thick. I couldn't read the whole thing, but I saw enough in half a second. The top page had a law firm header. Small writing. Lots of numbers. And in the margin, Trust Amendment Proposal. Dana had stuffed it under a stack of birthday cards and half-used batteries. She heard the drawer and spun. "What are you looking for?" she asked, voice tight. "Flashlight," I said calmly. "Figured it might come in handy with the weather lately." She nodded too quickly. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. I left the drawer open just wide enough for her to see that I saw. Then I sat back down and folded my hands. "Everything all right?" I asked, tilting my head just slightly. Michael fumbled with his glass. Yeah, of course." Dana was already reaching for the folder, trying to make it disappear like it hadn't existed. But it was too late. She knew I knew. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I wasn't ready. And I didn't have to be. Because now I had a clue. A real one. Whatever Dana was hiding in that drawer, it was legal. And it was recent. And it was not meant for my eyes. They thought I'd leave blind. But I just caught a glimpse of their strategy. And I wasn't about to walk into the night empty-handed. I picked up my coat and buttoned it slowly. Let them breathe easy for now. I was done asking for kindness. It was time to look for answers. I didn't slam the door when I left. I closed it quietly. Quiet was the only dignity I had left. I didn't cry on the way out. Not with Dana standing in the kitchen pretending to sip tea. Not with Michael pretending he wasn't watching from the hallway. I carried my overnight bag like it didn't hold my last thread of pride. Like I was just taking a little trip, not being removed from the house I'd built with my hands, my marriage, my motherhood. I sat in the car, engine off for a full 10 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. Where do you go when your child tells you you're not wanted? Where do you go when the home you've spent 35 years filling with birthdays, band-aids, and casseroles is suddenly not yours? I called my sister Miriam. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said, light and casual, not knowing the weight of my silence. "I need a place to stay tonight." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Guest room's made up. Come." I drove there in the dark. Every stoplight felt like a test I hadn't studied for. Every street lamp hit the windshield like judgment. I kept thinking, they're probably already in my bed, laughing, laying claim to what isn't theirs. When I pulled into Miriam's driveway, the porch light was on. She stood in the door with a sweater draped over her shoulders, her hair up in a messy bun like she always wore when she was half worried, half ready to fight. She opened her arms. I walked straight into them. "Oh, Ruth," she whispered. That's when I let myself cry. In her arms. In the driveway. Like a child. Like a woman who'd just been thrown out of her own life. Inside, her house smelled like cinnamon and lavender dryer sheets. She led me upstairs to the guest room. The same room I used to stay in after Robert's surgeries when I couldn't sleep at home. The same room I stayed in after Michael moved out for college. And I didn't know what to do with my hands anymore. The room hadn't changed. Still blue walls. Still floral quilt. Still a little lamp shaped like a lighthouse on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the comforter, and said nothing for a long time. Miriam sat beside me. "Did they say why?" she asked gently. "They didn't have to," I said. "They just acted like I was something to clean up, something in the way." She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say they didn't mean it. She said, "Then you don't go back. Not like that. Not as someone who can be dismissed." We sat in silence again. I wasn't used to not being in charge. Not cooking. Not fixing. Not covering for people. That night, I lay under Miriam's quilt staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the quiet hum of a house that didn't expect me to disappear. This wasn't my home. But it was safe. 2 days later, I sat with my friend at coffee shop. The coffee was bad. Burnt, bitter, watery. But I didn't care. I just needed the company. Gloria sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, like it was a lifeline. She was the kind of friend who didn't ask, "How are you?" She looked you in the eye and waited for the real answer. "I'm at my sister's," I said, voice low. "Just for now." She nodded like she already knew. Maybe she did. Small towns are good at keeping secrets until they're not. I stirred my coffee, watched the cream swirl like smoke. They told me to leave the morning of the funeral. Gloria's lips parted, but no sound came out. Just a slow blink, a sharp exhale. She reached over and touched my hand. No pity, just witness. They said the house wasn't mine, I added, like I was squatting in my own memories. That was when Gloria leaned in, voice lowered to a whisper that cut through the dull hum of the cafe. I saw Michael go into a law office last month, by himself. I looked up, startled. What? She nodded. Downtown. Harold Stein's office. Remember him? Old family attorney. I was at the dry cleaner across the street. Michael didn't see me, but I saw him. Walked in with a manila folder, came out 30 minutes later with a face like thunder. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind raced back to that red folder in the junk drawer. Gloria sipped her coffee like she was pacing me. You ever see the will? I shook my head slowly. No, but I found something. Just a glimpse. Dana had paperwork tucked away. Something legal. Looked like they tried to change something. Gloria sat back and crossed her arms. Your husband was no fool, Ruth. He may have trusted Michael, but he always had a backup plan. You think he didn't see how Dana looked at that house? I felt it then. That tiny spark again. The same one I felt in the garden. The one that whispered. He knew. He said something to me in March, I said suddenly. I'd forgotten about it. We were sitting on the porch. He looked out over the yard and said, I made sure you're taken care of, even if they get pushy. I thought he was just being sentimental. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Pushy's a nice word for what they are. I smiled weakly. I didn't think I'd need to double-check my own son. She reached into her purse and pulled out a notepad, tore off a page. Harold still takes clients. He's semi-retired, but he's sharp as ever. I'll write down the number. Just see what's on file. For your own peace of mind. I stared at the paper like it might burn a hole in my hand. Gloria, I said. What if I'm wrong? You're not, she said without blinking. But even if you were, wouldn't you rather know than wonder forever? The coffee had gone cold, but I didn't need it anymore. What I needed was clarity, proof. I needed to stop hoping they'd come to their senses and start preparing for the fight they'd already begun. My husband left something behind, something they tried to bury along with him. But now I had names. I had timelines. I had Gloria. And most importantly, I had a reason to believe this story wasn't over. Not even close. Later that week, the drawer stuck halfway open, swollen from humidity, or maybe just tired of being used. It wasn't mine, of course. Nothing in this room was. Not the chintz curtains. Not the borrowed dresser. Not the pale pink sheets with frilly trim. I hadn't picked out a single thing, and yet I folded my sweaters into those drawers like they belonged. Temporary, I kept telling myself. Just until I caught my breath. But breath wasn't the problem. Trust was. I closed the drawer gently and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged a little, just enough to remind me this was not home. But it was safe. And for now, that was enough. My sister had left a note on the nightstand. Made lemon bars. Help yourself. You are not a burden. Underneath, she'd drawn a crooked little heart. God bless her for knowing what I needed to hear, without asking what had happened. I stared at the notepad beside it, the one where I had started writing dates, names, and anything else I could remember. I'd titled it, in bold letters, What I Know. It wasn't much yet, but it was growing. Michael. Law office. Late May. Dana. Folder marked, Trust Amendment Proposal. Harold Stein. Attorney. My husband's choice. Not theirs. Me. Cut out. Or so they thought. The silence in the room felt different than it had in their house. There, it was sharp and heavy, the kind of silence that punishes you for speaking. Here, it was soft, room temperature silence, the kind that waited patiently while you gathered yourself. I sat back, closed my eyes, and pictured my husband. He was wearing that ridiculous fishing hat, the one with the lure stuck in the brim and the faded stain from when he dropped chili on it. He always wore it when we talked about serious things. He'd said it 3 times in the last year. No matter what happens, Ruth, the house is yours until the day you don't want it. Not them, not ever. I had smiled and nodded. not realizing he meant it as a warning. They thought they could erase me, but my husband had known, and he wouldn't have left me unarmed. I picked up my phone and scrolled until I found the number Gloria had scribbled for me. Harold Stein. I stared at it for a long moment, then pressed call. A young voice answered. Stein Law. This is Carrie. Hi, I said, surprised at how steady I sounded. My name is Ruth Harper. I'd like to make an appointment with Mr. Stein to review my husband's estate. There was a short pause. Then, oh, Mrs. Harper. We were expecting someone else. I blinked. Who? Your son, Michael. My grip on the phone tightened. Well, I said calmly, he'll have to wait. She hesitated. Do you have access to the file? I mean, are you listed as... I was married to the man for 42 years, I said flatly. He left me roses in his will long before he left me anything on paper. Carrie cleared her throat. Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Perfect, I said. I'll be there. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. What I felt was ready. I pulled the notepad closer, wrote down the appointment time, then circled it twice. Bold. Final. They thought I'd fold, that I'd retreat, that I'd feel too old, too tired, too ashamed to push back. But they forgot what I'm made of, and they forgot who built that house. Memory by memory, brick by stubborn brick. They could take their fake smiles and sneaky folders. I was coming for the truth. The door chimed softly as I stepped into Harold Stein's office, the kind of bell meant to be polite, not alarming. But inside, my nerves felt anything but polite. I had dressed with care. Navy blouse, gray slacks, and the same pearl earrings I wore the day Michael graduated college. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to remind myself that I had once been someone he was proud to belong to. The secretary at the front desk looked up, startled. Oh, she said, standing quickly. You must be... Ruth? Yes, I replied, calm and steady. I have a 10 a.m. with Mr. Stein, she blinked. We were expecting Michael. Her voice was friendly, but her eyes searched mine, like she was trying to figure out which character I was in, whatever story had already started without me. Well, I said, offering a small smile, I'm the widow, so I think I'll be the one to close the chapter. She nodded, flustered. Of course. Let me just let Mr. Stein know you're here. As she disappeared down the hall, I took a seat in the small waiting area. The air smelled like wood polish and aging paper, the kind of place where things were still done with pens and handshakes. My husband always liked that about Harold. Framed degrees lined the wall beside me. Harvard, NYU Law, bar admissions dating back to 1974. Harold didn't just dabble in estate law, he built it. Mrs. Harper? His familiar voice called. I looked up. Harold Stein hadn't changed much in the last decade. A little more stooped, perhaps. But the same full head of silver hair, the same tortoiseshell glasses, and the same no-nonsense warmth in his eyes. Come on in, he said, holding the door open for me. His office was filled with paper. Not messy, just full. Like someone who still believed in records, originals, and ink that didn't disappear with a power outage. He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. I sat. First, he said, folding his hands. I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband spoke of you often, right up to the end, always with warmth. I swallowed hard. Thank you. He nodded slowly, then turned to a thick manila folder on his desk. Now. You said you wanted to review the estate documents. I pulled both versions. I blinked. Both? Yes. He slid the folder open. There's the original version of the trust, dated about 4 years ago. And then there's an amended version, submitted recently. Not by your husband, by your son. I felt my body stiffen. Submitted? He raised a brow. It was unofficial. It showed up about a week before your husband passed. Michael dropped it off himself. Said your husband had signed it before passing, but couldn't locate the original signatures. My hands curled tightly in my lap. Harold continued, carefully. The language in Michael's version removed you as trustee and gave full control of the estate to him and his wife, including the house. I shut my eyes, just for a second. The burn behind them wasn't grief anymore. But, Harold added, flipping a page, your husband came in 3 weeks before he died. Quietly, just him and me. We updated the trust and will. Fully signed, witnessed, notarized. It restores full ownership of the estate to you. I stared at him. Harold looked up, voice steady. Ruth, your husband knew something was coming, and he made sure you were protected. I let the words settle over me like rain on dry soil. Protected. They thought they'd buried the truth with him, but the truth, his truth, was still here. Filed, signed, alive. My voice came out quiet but firm. Then I'm ready to make it official. Harold nodded, sliding the valid will across the desk. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I had the ground back under my feet. Harold closed the file slowly, like he was letting the truth settle into the room before it changed everything. The version your son brought me, he said, tapping the corner of the forged document, was incomplete. No witnesses, no legal notary. Just Michael's signature on behalf of your husband. And Dana's. He raised an eyebrow. Convenient, isn't it? The only 2 people who benefited were the ones signing for the deceased. My jaw tightened. Of course, he continued. I knew immediately it wouldn't hold. But I didn't say anything. I wanted to wait and see if you'd come in first. I looked at him sharply. Why? He gave a small, kind smile. Because your husband told me to expect trouble. He said, if Ruth doesn't show up to ask questions, that means they got to her. The floor tilted under me. Not from fear. From the flood of quiet, painful validation. He knew. That last month before he passed, he must have seen it. The way Michael and Dana circled. The way I bent myself smaller and smaller, thinking if I just stayed soft, I'd be safe. Harold reached into the folder again. There's something else. He pulled out a sealed envelope. My name, written across the front. My husband's handwriting, slanted, precise, unmistakable. I stared at it like it might disappear if I blinked. I didn't open it, Harold said gently. He gave it to me the same day we finalized the trust. My fingers were trembling as I took it. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not there. My breath caught on the first line. My Ruth, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And they did what I feared they would. I had to stop reading right there, just for a second. The room didn't move, but something in my chest did. Like grief was rearranging itself into something sharper, not anger. Proof. I love our son, but I see what you won't say aloud. He's not the boy we raised anymore. Dana is clever, calculating. I suspect she's already asking questions she shouldn't. I've watched you shrink to make them comfortable, and it's broken my heart, so I made changes. The house, the accounts, the assets, they stay in your hands until you pass. Then they'll go to the grandchildren. Not Michael. Not Dana. I pressed the paper to my chest. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was rage or gratitude or both colliding in my ribs. You are not a placeholder. You are the home. You are the history. You are the one who loved without an angle. And if they try to call you weak, let this remind you. I trusted you with everything. I didn't cry. I wouldn't. Because this letter wasn't for mourning. It was for clarity. My breath caught. Not to Michael, I asked. He shook his head. Only through the children. Your husband was clear. He suspected Dana's influence had gone too far. He didn't want them rewarded for manipulation. I stared at the letter. At my name. That familiar curve of the R. He left me this, not because he doubted me, but because he trusted I'd wake up. I stood slowly. I want to begin the formal probate process. I want everything filed properly. Harold nodded. We'll get started today. And, I added, I want it on record that an attempt was made to submit a falsified will. I won't pursue criminal charges, yet, but I want that noted. Harold's expression hardened with approval. Smart. I slipped the letter into my purse, still unopened. Still heavy. They had tried to cut me out like I was a removable fixture, like I was drywall they could patch over. But I wasn't drywall, I was the foundation. And now, they didn't know it, but the ground beneath their little scheme had just shifted. Dana and Michael thought they'd cornered me into powerlessness. But what they'd really done was activate me. I left the office that day with my shoulders straighter than they'd been in months. The library smelled like dust and dignity. I sat alone in the far corner of the research room, where the light came in slanted and soft through the tall windows. I used to come here for book club. Now it was something else. It was where I began to gather. I'd spread out papers across the wooden table. Photocopies Harold made for me, old property records, my marriage certificate, the deed we filed together in 1992. I had legal ground now. I wasn't guessing anymore. But I needed more than legality. I needed understanding. I needed clarity. Because somewhere between grief and that cold funeral morning, I'd stopped trusting my instincts, stopped seeing clearly. But now every page I read was a page they didn't expect me to turn. They thought I'd curl up and go quietly. But here I was, pen in hand, building a timeline. I highlighted dates. I circled names. Michael had submitted that fake document exactly 8 days after the funeral. That wasn't grief. That was strategy. And Dana? Dana had been orchestrating longer than that. The red folder. The junk drawer. The way she flinched when I asked about paperwork. She wasn't just helping Michael. She was directing him. I pulled out the photo I kept in my bag now, one of me and my husband, sitting under the willow tree in the backyard. He had his arm around me. Our heads were touching. He looked proud. I looked tired. I stared at that photo for a long time. He'd warned me. In subtle ways, little comments that felt odd at the time. He'd started giving me access to more financial records in those final weeks. He showed me how to log into our bank accounts, told me where the mortgage documents were. Just in case, he'd said. It wasn't just caution. It was foresight. He'd seen something shifting. He'd tried to prepare me gently. And now I understood why he hadn't shouted, why he hadn't accused Michael or called Dana out directly. Because he knew they'd play innocent, knew they'd lie, knew they'd try to twist the narrative once he was gone. So instead, he did something better. He wrote the truth down, filed it, signed it, witnessed it, and left it where they couldn't touch it. But I could. That was love. Quiet, careful, defiant love. I pressed the photo flat against the table and whispered, "Thank you. I see it now." A soft voice startled me. "Mrs. Harper?" It was Ava, the young librarian I'd known since she was in braces. Her mother used to live down the block from us. I looked up. "Yes, sweetie?" She stepped closer. I couldn't help but notice, "You're looking into probate law and title history." Her face flushed pink. "My aunt just went through something similar. If you need any help digging into property records or court filings, I'm pretty good with the database systems." I smiled, stunned. That would be incredibly helpful. She sat beside me, eager. "Who's trying to take what from you?" I chuckled under my breath. "My son and his wife." Her eyes widened. "People really do that?" "They do," I said softly. "But only if you let them." And that's what this was. Not revenge, not bitterness, reclamation. I left the library that afternoon, with a folder twice as thick as when I'd arrived. My hands were ink-stained, my purse heavy with proof, my heart lighter. Because now I wasn't just grieving. I was building. A case. A boundary. A future. It was always the little moments that gave them away. I didn't follow Dana on purpose. I was picking up milk and stamps, walking slow like I always did when I didn't want to go home. The heat clung to the asphalt, and my feet were sore. But then I saw her, across the parking lot, leaning against her shiny black SUV, arms crossed, pacing in tight little circles. I ducked behind the cart return, the metal still warm from the sun. I don't know why I hid. Habit, maybe. Years of shrinking myself made hiding second nature. But I heard her voice. Tight, shrill, and nothing like the sweet tone she used with church ladies or Facebook posts. "Well, then where's the money supposed to come from now?" she hissed into the phone. "Don't you get it? That was the plan, Michael. You promised me." She paused, face flushed. Her hand flew up to shield her eyes from the sun, but it couldn't hide the panic. "No, I don't care what your mother found out. We already booked the contractor. The deposit's gone. That deck isn't going to build itself." I stood still as stone, the cart handle biting into my palm. I watched her shift her weight, huff, and slam the door shut so hard the entire row of parked cars seemed to flinch. So, they had plans, expensive ones. A new deck, I guessed, probably some remodeling, maybe an extension on my house, before they realized it wasn't theirs. Dana peeled out of the lot like someone late to their own lie. Her SUV swerved slightly, then straightened out. She didn't see me, but I saw everything I needed. It wasn't about grief. It was about entitlement. She thought she'd already won. She thought the paperwork Michael slipped to Harold was enough to push me out of the picture. She thought silence from me meant surrender, but what they hadn't counted on was that I wasn't grieving blindly. I was grieving with my eyes wide open now. I walked slowly to my car, heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. They were counting on that money, counting on it to fix up their fantasy life, to fund the version of the future they thought they deserved. And now it was gone. Because I had it. Not the cash. Not yet. But the legal power, the trust, the will, the paper trail, the truth. I sat in my car with the AC off, sweat forming at the back of my neck, and I didn't even notice. I just stared through the windshield at nothing. The woman in the parking lot 10 minutes ago wasn't my daughter-in-law. She was my opponent. And she was unraveling. That was what betrayal does when it starts to fail. It unravels in public places, parking lots, courtrooms, conference rooms. She thought she could push me out quietly, with a smug smile and a signature forged behind a funeral veil. But now she was the one scrambling. And me? I wasn't scared anymore. At follow-up, meeting with a lawyer, I said, "I need to schedule a will reading," I said. My voice didn't shake. Formal. With both of them present. I want them to hear it. From me. In a room they can't escape. Harold's eyebrows lifted. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "They deserve to see what he really left behind. Not just the money, the truth." He nodded slowly. "I'll draft the invitation." We went over logistics, probate timeline, trustee powers, the house title transfer already underway. All of it felt surreal, like the pieces were finally falling into place, not by luck, but by preparation, by love that planned ahead. I didn't flinch when the notary stamped the documents, didn't blink when the banker slid over the form transferring trustee access. And I didn't smile, either, because this wasn't joy. It was restoration. Harold had laid out every step, with the kind of calm that comes from decades of dealing with messy families and their even messier secrets. "The moment you sign these," he said, "you're the sole legal authority over the estate, every asset, every account, the house, the investments, all of it." I signed my name, carefully, legibly. Ruth Harper, bold and permanent. Then I looked up and said, "It's time we put the grandchildren first." Harold blinked. "Excuse me?" "I want to open a new trust," I said, sliding a notepad across the desk. I'd already made the list. For Lily, for James, and for the baby on the way. Each of them gets a share. When they turn 25, Dana and Michael don't touch a cent. He stared at me for a second, then smiled. "That can be arranged." Next, I walked to the bank. Same branch I've been with since 1985. Knew the clerk by name. She nearly fell over herself when I asked to set up new passwords, freeze joint access, and print full records. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Harper?" "It is now," I said. Then came the final step. I wrote the invitations. Formal tone. No emotion. Just facts. Mr. Michael Harper and Mrs. Dana Harper, You are formally requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Robert Charles Harper. Date: Friday, 10 a.m. Location: Stein and Associates. Third floor conference room. Presence is mandatory to receive any information pertaining to estate disbursement. No signature. No, love, Mom. Just the truth. Dignified and ice cold. Let them wonder. Let Dana pace the hallway, and Michael scroll through old emails looking for loopholes. There weren't any. That evening, I returned to my sister's place. She was in the kitchen, folding laundry, humming a little. The kind of woman who saves jam jars and always writes thank you notes. "You look taller," she said as I walked in. "I feel taller." She handed me a bowl of soup and sat across from me like she knew I needed the silence more than the soup. "They're not ready," I whispered. "No," she said. "But you are." After dinner, I went to the guest room and opened the envelope again. The letter. Just one line I kept rereading. "You are not a placeholder, you are the home." That was what they forgot. I wasn't some relic to be swept aside. I was the beating heart of that house, the one who held the birthdays and broken arms and Christmas mornings together. Michael and Dana had forgotten what it means to build something. I arrived 20 minutes early. The receptionist offered coffee. I asked for 2 extra cups. When Michael and Dana walked in, 5 minutes late, of course, I was already seated at the head of the conference table, hands folded neatly in my lap, navy suit sharp as a blade. Dana's heels clicked too fast as she entered, and Michael's tie was half loosened like he thought this was some casual affair. "Mom?" Michael said with fake surprise. "Didn't expect to see you here already." I stood, greeted them both with a nod. Not warmth, just acknowledgement. Then I handed them each a cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this. We're about to get started." Dana took hers cautiously. Michael frowned. "You don't usually drink coffee black." "I do now," I said. Before they could reply, Harold stepped in. He wasn't smiling. He didn't greet them like old friends. He simply gestured toward the table and said, "Please take your seats. This will be formal and recorded, per standard procedure." Dana laughed, too loudly. "Is that really necessary? We're family." Harold didn't answer. Just pressed the record button on the small black device in the center of the table. "This is the formal reading of the last will and testament of Robert Charles Harper." I watched their faces as Harold opened the file. Dana leaned forward eagerly. Michael shifted in his chair. He looked like he hadn't slept. Harold read with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who understood exactly how much weight each word carried. "I, Robert Charles Harper, being of sound mind and body, do hereby state the following as my final will and testament." Their eyes flicked to one another, still calm, still smug. "I hereby name my wife, Ruth Ellen Harper, as sole trustee and beneficiary of all estate holdings until her passing." Dana's smile cracked. Michael blinked. "At which time, remaining assets are to be equally divided among my grandchildren, Lily Harper, James Harper, and any subsequent biological descendants." There it was. The first flush of red crawling up Michael's neck. Dana opened her mouth but said nothing. Harold didn't stop. "Any attempts to submit or act upon unauthorized or falsified versions of this will are to result in immediate forfeiture of all claims to the estate." He closed the folder with quiet finality. Then he looked directly at them. "There is only one valid document on record," he said. "This one." Michael opened his mouth. "That's not what—" Harold raised a hand. "Your version was not signed by your father. It lacked witnesses, a notary, and legal verification. It is void. Your actions are noted." Dana's cup rattled as she set it down. "But he told us we were supposed to." "Supposed to what?" I asked, my voice soft but steady. "Inherit something you didn't earn?" They turned to me, stunned. As if they forgot I was there, I reached into my purse and placed the sealed envelope, his letter, on the table. "He left this for me," I said, meeting Michael's eyes. "He knew what you were trying to do, and he chose not to confront you, not in anger, but in truth and law." Dana pushed back her chair. "This is a mistake. This isn't fair." I stood. "No," I said. "What wasn't fair was being told to pack my bags the morning of my husband's funeral." What wasn't fair was watching you two smirk while I carried 42 years of memories out in a suitcase. Michael swallowed hard. Dana's mascara was already starting to smudge. You may have my blood, I told him, but you don't have my trust. Silence fell like a curtain, and for the first time in this entire mess, I was the one holding the final word. Dana didn't even try to hide her tears anymore. She was shaking, silent, stunned. Michael just sat there, staring blankly at the folder in Harold's hands like it might change if he willed it hard enough. I didn't move. I didn't offer tissues. I didn't reach across the table. I sat tall in my chair, hands still, eyes forward. If they were expecting one last act of softness, they were decades too late. I don't understand, Michael muttered finally. His voice cracked and low. He told me I could handle things, that I'd take care of everything after. Harold cleared his throat. Mr. Harper, your father did express hope that you'd take on responsibility, but not at your mother's expense, and not with falsified documents. Dana finally found her voice, but it came out venomous. She manipulated him. She got him to change it when he was vulnerable. I turned to her, slow and steady. He changed it before the last hospital visit. He came to Harold's office on his own, drove himself, signed every page, clear and lucid. She was in his ear. Dana spat, wild now. She turned him against us. No, I said, sharper than I meant to. You did that. With your whispering, your hovering, your little red folders shoved in my junk drawer like I wouldn't notice. Michael looked up. What folder? Dana went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And that was all I needed. Tell me, Dana, I continued. Was the plan always to kick me out the morning of the funeral? Or was that just your moment of inspiration? Harold didn't interrupt. He let it happen. This wasn't just a will reading anymore. It was exposure. Dana pushed her chair back. I don't have to sit here and be accused. No, you don't, I said. But when the court looks at the submission of an invalid trust amendment, they're going to ask who filled it out, who signed it, and who benefited. Michael looked like he might throw up. I didn't know it was fake. She said Dad signed it. Dana whipped toward him. Don't put this on me. You handed it in. And you said it was taken care of. Oh, so now it's my fault? I stayed silent. I didn't need to say another word. They were unraveling themselves. Harold stood slowly. This concludes the reading. The trust is active. Ownership has transferred. Mrs. Harper, you are within your full rights to take possession of all property. Michael turned to me one last time. Mom, please, the house. It's where my kids live. You should have thought of that, I said, before you tried to steal it out from under their grandmother. I didn't say it with malice. I said it with clarity, the same way he told me to pack my things. Dana gathered her purse in a fury. We'll fight this. Harold raised a brow. You're welcome to. But be advised, every document we filed is binding. And if you pursue legal action, we'll request a formal inquiry into the attempt to defraud the estate. Her mouth opened, then shut. A fish gasping for a life that didn't exist anymore. Michael stood slowly. So that's it? You're just cutting us out? I met his eyes. You cut me out a long time ago. I'm just drawing the line where it should have been all along. They left without another word. I stood alone in the room, heart pounding, but head high. I didn't win by yelling. I didn't win by begging. I won by knowing who I was, what was mine, and what I would no longer apologize for protecting. The room emptied, but I didn't stand right away. I needed the silence, not the kind they used, like a weapon in that house after he died. No, this was the silence of confirmation. The kind that comes after the last lie is laid bare, after the last mask falls off. I pulled the letter from my purse again. You are not a placeholder. You are the home. My hand traced the words as if touching them could anchor me. I knew what I had to do now. Not just legally, but emotionally. No more limbo. No more wondering what might have been. My husband didn't leave questions. He left answers, and a boundary wrapped in ink and intention. Harold returned to gather the papers. I glanced up. "Did you see their faces?" I asked, not with triumph, just observation. "I did," he said. "They weren't shocked that the will favored you. They were shocked it still favored you. They thought they had buried your part in the story." I nodded. "They thought love made me weak." He gave a small smile. "It didn't. It made you prepared." I stood slowly and walked to the head of the table, rested one hand on the chair where my husband used to sit during those boring tax meetings, always tapping his fingers like a drum while Harold droned on about clause this and subsection that. "I want the house title filed immediately," I said, and the eviction process started. He raised an eyebrow. "They're still living there?" "Not for long." He pulled a small stack of papers from his briefcase. "Already drafted. You just need to sign and date." I did. Every signature was a stone laid in a road back to myself. When we finished, I turned to Harold once more. "He knew what they were doing," I said, more to myself than him. "He saw it, and he didn't stop loving them, but he stopped trusting them. That's what love with wisdom looks like," he said gently. I held the sealed file close to my chest as I walked out. The elevator ride down felt slower than I remembered. The kind of slow that lets your body catch up to the moment. In the lobby, I paused by the door. Through the glass, I saw Dana outside, pacing, phone in hand, barking something to someone. Probably her mother, maybe a realtor, maybe the devil himself. Michael stood farther away, hunched over, hands in his pockets, like a boy waiting to be picked up from detention. I didn't move. I just watched, and I realized something strange. I didn't hate them. I pitied them. They had love once. Real love. Mine. My husband's. The kind that cooks dinner and remembers birthdays and babysits sick grandkids at 2 a.m. But they chose ambition over grace. Control over kindness. A week later, the courthouse was colder than I expected. Maybe it was the marble floors. Or maybe it was the fact that some places carry the chill of accountability in their bones. I stood at the filing window, papers in hand. Neatly signed, properly notarized, every line in order. "Eviction notice," I said to the clerk. "They were notified by mail, but I want it processed through the court. I want it clean." She glanced over the documents, then gave a soft, surprised smile. "Looks like everything's in perfect order, Mrs. Harper." That name meant something again. Not just a widow, not just a mother, a property owner, trustee, executor, the woman who didn't back down. I left the courthouse with a stamped copy in my purse and a calm in my chest that had been missing since the day I stood in the living room in my funeral dress and heard Dana say, "Pack your bags." Now it was their turn to pack. 30 days, that's what they had. No yelling. No locks changed overnight. No drama. Just a clear, legal boundary. You don't belong here anymore. Michael called me 2 days later. First time in weeks. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "Can we talk? Please. For the kids' sake." I didn't reply. Because this wasn't about the kids. If it had been, he'd have remembered who used to pick them up from school when Dana was too tired. Who baked their birthday cakes? Who kept their baby books when Dana said she didn't have time? This wasn't about the kids. It was about losing access to what they thought was already theirs. Dana didn't bother texting. She sent a lawyer letter instead, thinly veiled threats about undue influence and emotional distress. Harold responded with 3 lines. "All claims are null. Attempt to resubmit forged documents is recorded. Do not contact our client again outside formal counsel." I framed that letter. Not out of pettiness, out of peace. It was the first time in years someone had protected me instead of the other way around. I spent that week preparing the house, not to leave it, but to return to it. I walked the property lines, stood under the willow tree out back, took photos of the roses, now blooming again, like they'd waited for me to come home. Every memory was still there. Every echo of my husband's voice, the way he used to hum when he mowed the lawn, the quiet way he'd press his hand into the small of my back when we passed each other in the kitchen. It hadn't disappeared. It had just been buried, under noise, entitlement, and fake smiles. Now I was clearing it away. My sister helped me pack, not with sadness, with resolve. "We'll do it slow," she said. "Box by box." "I'm not in a rush," I told her. And I wasn't. Because I wanted them to feel the days tick by. I wanted them to see the truth, hanging in the air, every time they opened a drawer or poured a cup of coffee in a kitchen that didn't belong to them. The foundation wasn't cracking beneath me anymore. It was solid, and in just a few weeks' time they'd be gone.